اوكي، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن ذلك قوله عز وجل ألف لام ميم. So obviously this is difficult to analyze, right? Like if I wrote a book and it began the title or the first chapter opened QST, and I say analyze QST, and I say, what do you mean analyze it? Say, well, where's the subject, where's the predicate, where's the this, where's the that? And I'm just like dumbstruck. I don't even know what the question is. So then I say, okay, well, if you could replace grammatically the word Q, the letter Q, with the word he or him, which would you put there? Like, I don't understand. Okay, well, if I said, for example, I saw Jack, would you replace the word Jack with he or with him? I say him. Okay. So QST. It's like, yeah, I'm just lost. Right. So how do you even analyze that? That's the question. Like, how do you analyze three letters that we don't really understand? Right. So this is the discussion now. Alif Lam Mim. It says, ومذهب الخليل وسيبويه وما في ألف لام ميم وما أشبهها أنها لم تعرب. There's no analysis. لأنها بمنزلة حروف التهجي, the letters of the alphabet. فهي محكية. You're just saying A, B, C. ولو أعربت ذهبت معنى الحكاية. If you're analyzing it as a sentence, like, it wouldn't mean what you mean when you say A, B, C. You just quote three letters. It wouldn't really make sense. So it's kind of like, it doesn't make any sense. وقد أعرب بعض الاسم. Okay. وقال الفراء. So Farra has a different opinion. He says إنما لم تعرب لأنك لم ترد أن تخبر عنها بشيء. You're not saying anything. قال أحمد بن يحيى لا يعجبني قول الخليل فيها لأنك إذا قلت زاي فليست هذه الزاي التي في زيد لأنك قد زدت عليها. Right? So when you're saying the letter Z, it's not the same as saying Zaid, because Zaid is a word and Zay is a letter. It's not necessarily the same thing. قال أبو جعفر هذا الرد لا يلزم لأنك لا تقدر أن تنطق بحرف واحد حتى تزيد عليه. قال ابن الكيسان ألف لام في موضع نصب بمعنى اقرأ. Right? So it's saying read these letters. أو عليك بألف لام. Right? ويجوز أن يكون موضعه رفعا بمعنى هذا ألف لام ميم أو هو أو ذاك ثم قال عز وجل. So basically, so that's, who is it? Ibn Kaysan. ذلك. He says فيه ستة أوجه يكون بمعنى هذا ذلك الكتاب فيكون خبر هذا. Right? So هذا ذلك الكتاب. This thing is that book. ويكون بمعنى ألف لام ميم ذلك. هذا قول الفراء أي حروف المعجم ذلك الكتاب. The letters of the dictionary, that is what the book is. واجتزئ بعضها من بعض. And it's just been kind of cut up a little bit. واجتزئ, it's been cut into pieces. جزء. ويكون هذا رفعا بالابتداء. or والكتاب خبره. Okay. So now the next issue then is when you say هذا ذلك الكتاب, right? So I say, where's that man? I say, this is that man. Where's that man that you're talking about? This is that man. Okay. So how do you analyze this is that man? Okay. Well, obviously هذا مبتدا. ذلك خبر. Easy. So now how do you say how do you analyze then ذلك الرجل? هذا ذلك الرجل. Well, how do you analyze that? He says عطف البيان الذي يقوم مقام النعت. Calls it عطف بيان. Who knows what عطف بيان is?
It's like my brother Saad, like something that clarifies what came before.
Okay.
Okay.
So what's the difference between this is my هذا أخي سعد as a badal or as a عطف بيان?
If I recall roughly, um, it the difference lies in what explains which explains which, whether it's something along those lines, but the difference between عطف بيان and بدل. والله أعلم.
Okay. That's exactly
Is
right.
it that
That's exactly right, Sheikh Arif. Is so how do we find that out? Is let's compare it to هذا أخي الأكبر. Okay. هذا أخي الأكبر. This is my oldest brother. Which is maqsood? Which is what is the point that you're trying to make? Are you trying to say that he's your brother, or are you trying to say that he's older?
he's older?
So that's the maqsood. So if that was the maqsood, it would not be a nat. You said, for example, هذا أخي الأكبر. Oh, this is my brother, the older one of them, right? So it would not be a nat. Okay. So if you look at a nat, the difference in atf and a nat is just its qualifications. Its function is the same, but its qualifications are different. A nat or a sifa is mushtaq or mu'awwal bil mushtaq, like akbar, asghar, kabir, mashhur, right? But its function is just to qualify and give more specificity to something else. It is not maqsood min haythu huwa. Okay? So هذا بيت جميل, right? The fundamental statement is هذا بيت. Jamil is something that's extra. So the same thing with atbayan and badal. If the second word is just there as an additional thing, that's called atbayan. هذا أخي سعد, right? This, you're trying to tell me that he's your brother. And by the way, his name is Sa'ad. That's called atbayan. But this is my brother Sa'ad, right? So you just mentioned my brother as a kind of an intro, but the point is this is Sa'ad, right? And then then I can invert it. هذا سعد أخي, right? So the fact that you could switch it around, right? You could say, so you said هذا 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 سعد هذا سعد أخي. So how do I know that which is emphatic? Is that move it around and see if you change it does if it makes the same thing, if it makes sense. So if you look at the sentence, for example, if you look at the sentence with هذا, it's a bit tricky. So when you said أريد هذه السيارة, أريد هذه السيارة, do you mean أريد هذه and you mentioned السيارة as extra information? Or did you point at it to just introduce the idea, but you mean the car? And how do I know you could do that? Because you said I want the car. Like, what do you want? The car. This thing, right? And so if I can change, if I look at the sentence, أريد السيارة هذه. هذه was obviously just mentioned just as extra. So then when you said أريد هذه السيارة, that's going to be بدل because the مقصود is سيارة. But if the maqsood is not sayyara, it's this, by which I mean a car, then that's called atf bayan. Does that make sense? So atf bayan is basically a sifa that is not mushtaq. So look at it as a sifa, weigh it against the sifa, see if it adds up, and then it will make sense. If it doesn't make sense, then it's going to be a badal. Does that make sense, Sheikh Muhammad Arif, Jawad, Muhammad, Zafar?
Yes.
Right. And this is a quite a useful point of grammar, because grammar is supposed to help us understand, but it doesn't always help us understand. Like sometimes it's just trying to put something in a place, like I don't know, something, in your world, Muhammad Hashir, right? There's lots of things in engineering which understanding the science isn't particularly useful, because as long as we know what we're doing, it works, right? Like I remember seeing this thing, I was amazed. Siphoning. Does everyone know what that is? To siphon water?
Yeah.
Not really.
Not really, right? So I was in Jordan, right? In Jordan, obviously Middle East, have an issue with water. And there's this guy whose flat had run out of water. Okay. And so there's this guy, this worker from southern Egypt who is not educated at all, probably can't even can just about write his name. He goes up on the top of the building, gets a tube, puts a tube in a tank of water, right? And then puts that same tube. So there's a tank of water, the tube goes up, and then the tube goes up, and then the tube goes down into another tank of water, which is lower down. So I'm looking at him like, why are they doing that? Right? Like, what's going on? And so then what he does is he sucks some of the water and throws the one side of this tube, of this what's it called, hose, off the side of the building, and then it starts dripping. When it starts flowing, he puts the side of it in the lower tank. So what's happening is the water is in the upper tank, high, and it's going to the lower tank, but it's actually going up. Like, how did you get the water to go up? So the water goes from the tank and it goes up without a pump, and then it goes down and it starts flowing. I was like, how did that work? Right? So someone like Muhammad Hashid, he's an engineer, got the maths involved, got this and got that. Is it to do with, I don't know, is it to do with just gravity? Is it to do with what's it called? Hydrogen bonds? I don't know. It's quite is that, I don't know what's going on. Go right. You don't need to explain right now, Muhammad Hashid. But my point is,
Yeah.
the guy had no clue, right? The guy doesn't know how it works scientifically, but that doesn't matter. The function is there. Does that make sense? So sometimes technology doesn't need to be explained. Like, how does the wheel work? Like, explain the transfer of energy of the wheels. Like, dude, I don't need to know about the transfer of, I just know that a wheel works, So sometimes grammar is pointless, because if Muhammad Hasha came and explained it to him, nothing would be added. Does that make sense? Like, we sit with this guy who's from Egypt, southern Egypt, not educated, and sit down with him, explain to him the science of it. Nothing has been added because he was already doing it. Does that make sense? So like, you're trying to
Yeah.
explain the science of the mubtada and khabar. It's like, I already know what the mubtada and khabar is. You're saying X is Y. Like, what was the point? Right? Like, what did you add when you told me that the mubtada does rafa of the khabar and the khabar does rafa of the mubtada, or vice versa? Like, nothing. Like, nothing happened. other times, grammar it's very sensitive to the meaning, right? كم رجلا عندك كم رجل عندك. Oh, right. One means how many men are at your house. The other one means oh my God, you have so many men at your house, right? There's a difference, you know. So sometimes grammar is really important, right? And so here's an issue where the word look exactly the same. ذلك كتاب, ذلك كتاب. But do you mean this or do you mean that? And the discussion, whether it's a mubtada or a khabar, is 100% relevant into understanding the text. Sorry, whether it's a atf bayan or is it a badal is really important. Like that's a good, useful concept that I should think about, and it helps me when I'm analyzing the text and putting it in category A or category B. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we're going to find this
Yes.
again and again where grammar helps us, grammar doesn't help us, right? But now, if nobody understands how siphoning works, we have a problem, right? So Muhammad Hasha, just for my curiosity, how does siphoning work then?
Yeah, so normally it's pressure difference. So when you suck, you create vacuum in the pump in the hose, and then your tank at the lower level should be open. So meaning that there's a pressure from the air, like atmospheric pressure at the ground, that's pushing on the surface of the water. So
Uh-huh.
because you created vacuum in the hose, the pressure is higher on the surface of the water, which pushes it down, and then the water will go into the hose up. So as long as then when you throw it down, then like you have a vacuum in the hose, and then the pressure at the end is almost the same. But now because of the vacuum, the water can flow until it gets to the end where like it flows out.
Okay, well there we go. So I was thinking about, but it's not right. It's not related to the. So could you? Okay, so but the hose always has to be going down though. Yeah.
Yeah, for it to work the hose, because like if you let it stay up, then
Yeah.
the
Then
gravity at the end of the
yeah,
hose
yeah,
will
yeah,
force back
yeah,
the
yeah.
water.
Right.
But now because like you created vacuum in the hose, and once you throw it down, you have both the vacuum and the gravity. So like for the water to go up, it's the vacuum that's forcing it up. But when it gets at the point of the highest of the hose, for water to flow now down to the other tank, it just uses gravity to flow down against the lower pressure.
Um. So and what was I going to say? And can that happen with physical thing? Can that happen with non-liquids like sand? Could you do that with sand or something like that, or powders? Was it something
It's more
unique to
difficult
liquid?
because like now you have like the force that force from the gravity depends on the weight of the mass of the whatever you are pulling. So if mass is very large, then the vacuum will not be able. Like you have to have enough vacuum to be able to pull
Right,
it
right,
up.
right.
So the vacuum may not be enough for sand, but it's enough for like liquid. So it's easier, for example, to kind of pump paraffin or
Oh,
gasoline
then yeah,
than water,
then it
because
is
like
water.
yeah. So it depends with the also the mass or density of whatever you are sucking,
Hmm.
siphoning.
Right.
Yeah.
So can we see this? Like, so here we have, somebody who's an engineer. He's talking about mass. He's talking about density. He's talking about pressure and what these things. Imagine if nobody knows these things. But can you see that it didn't change what that man did? Whether he knew about it or didn't know about it is all the same. So you're going to find, for example, Imam Shafi'i doing usul al-fiqh and doing ijtihad, and then you ask him, Imam Shafi'i, is this or is this? And he's like, no, I don't know. I never even thought about that, right? But that doesn't mean we shouldn't ask those questions, right? Because you will find then suddenly things that like very interesting things like, let's say hydrogen bonds, right? Why is it when you look at a cup, the water goes up? It's not actually flat, right? or why is it that that water's almost sticky? So these are all very important discussions. If nobody does it, it doesn't work. So the same thing in Arabic grammar. Nobody asks these really pointless, annoying questions, then suddenly somewhere else we can't solve the problem. Right? This is what we're doing. Khair. So anyway, so he says, ذلك الكتاب, so we mentioned here 6. So it says عطف بيان الذي يقوم مقام النعت, right? So it is a na'at, the same thing. Right? It's the only difference is al-kitab is not mushtaq, so you can't say, right? As opposed to ذلك الكبير, that big thing, right? So you can make that big thing, you could make it a badal. It's not impossible. But you could also make it عطف بيان. Okay. Now another point then is you will see in simple i'rabs, they will say badal or عطف بيان. You say, well, you mean theoretically it's badal or عطف بيان, but it can't be both, and there is a difference. Okay. Okay, and he says وهدى خبر, right? ذلك كتاب لا ريب فيه هدى, right? ويكون لا ريب فيه. Is this another position? So it says ذلك الكتاب. Oh, there's going to be a second khabar. So basically, لا ريب فيه could be a second khabar, right? So in Arabic, you can have two khabars, which is really, really weird. Like imagine if in English, I can say this. I can repeat the word am. Like I say, I am Fareed, am English. That doesn't make any sense in English, does it? You can say, I am Fareed and I am English. But you can't say, I am Fareed, am English, right? Am half Swiss, am sitting in a car. Like that doesn't make any sense. You can do that in Arabic. So you can say things like, so ذلك الكتاب, so ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه, ذلك الكتاب, or هذا ذلك الكتاب. هذا مبتدأ, ذلك الكتاب خبر, لا ريب فيه خبر. Right? So that's also possible. Or ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين. Right? That's also could be a خبر. والكوفيون يقولون الهاء العائدة الخبر. الهاء العائدة الخبر. The فيه is the خبر, which is really weird. So what it seems to be that they're referring to is that when you have a khabar that is a sentence, you have to have a pronoun in it or something like that that goes back to the mubtada, right? So in English, again, you cannot have a sentence that is a khabar. You cannot say, I am sitting in a car. So I am sitting in a car cannot come after am. That doesn't make any sense. He is scratching his head. So he is scratching his head cannot come after is. That doesn't make any sense. You can in Arabic. So, but the issue is then that sentence that you put after is or am or are in Arabic, that has to have something in it to connect to the previous sentence. So I can say, for example, I am eating. So in the sentence, I am eating, there is a pronoun, I, which goes back to the first I. So that's fine. You could say something like this. My dog is sick. My dog is sick. So how could you have the sentence, my dog is sick, after I am in Arabic? Ana kalbi marid, right? It doesn't mean I am my dog, right? It means I am, and the khabar is kalbi marid. My dog is sick, right? So what connects kalbi marid to ana? A pronoun, kalbi, he, right? I could have so the default is whenever you have a sentence as a khabar, you have to have an a'id, you have to have a pronoun that goes back to the thing. Now, in reality, it doesn't have to be a pronoun. It could be something more general than that. For example, al-qari'atu mal-qari'atu, right? So I repeated the word, right? You could repeat the word. You could repeat the concept, right? Ni'ma rajulu Zaydun. Ay Zaydun ni'ma rajulu. So literally, Zayd, men are awesome. So, or a more literal translation, Zaydun ni'ma rajulu. Zayd is, men are amazing. So what's the relationship between Zayd and men are amazing? Well, Zayd's a man, right? It would not make sense to say, Zayd is women are amazing. That wouldn't make any sense because there's no connection now, right? So it has to be something, generality, some kind of word, something like that, right? Some kind of connection, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Okay, and we don't call it a'id, we call it a rabit, right? In a silatul mawsul, right? After alladhi, man, allati, we call that the a'id. That has to have a pronoun. Alladhi ja'at, ay here. Alladhi ra'aytuha, the ha. Allati sayyaratuha, كذا, right? سيارتها, there has to be a pronoun in after الذي, التي, الذين, man. That's called ism mawsul. But after when we have a khabar when we have the khabar as a sentence, you have to have a rabit. You have to have some kind of connection, be it a pronoun or be it something else. So anyway, it seems like they consider that pronoun to be the khabar, right? So they're looking at the a'id itself as a khabar, and the thing around it is something else. That's how they label it. Wallahu a'lam. So والوجه السادس أن يكون الخبر لا ريب فيه لأن معنى لا شك بمعنى حق, right? ذلك الكتاب حق, right? أي لا ريب فيه meaning حق. ويكون التمام على هذا على لا ريب. Okay? ويكون التمام. What is tamam? This is a very important term, التمام, which means the end of the sentence. Okay? So our author, النحاس, is arguably more famous for a book called القطع القطع والائتناف, where to stop and where to start, again, which is a book on where to stop and start in the Quran. So obviously we stop and start at ayahs in general, but what about in the middle of the verse? Where do we stop and start in the verse? When we pick up the Mus'haf, we have these signs in it. Where did those signs come from? It came from books like Al-Qata' wal-I'tinaf by Nahas and books that came after him and others, right? So that's a very important book, and so I advise you all, please have a look at it. Al-Qata' wal-I'tinaf by Nahas. Have a look at it, flick through it, see what his sources are. Is he quoting hadiths? Is he quoting Sahaba? Is he quoting Tabi'een? Is he relying heavily on grammar, etc.? It's pretty an important book. Okay, so you have to understand he is one of these people who have built the Mus'haf that we read, basically. It's not just him, but his early work is pretty important. There's another work that comes after him. I can't remember what it is, but it's called al-waqf. We use the word al-waqf wal-ibtida, or a waqf, where to stop, right? And so if you look at the back of the Saudi Mus'haf, they'll say this Saudi Mus'haf was written according to this, and al-waqf wal-ibtida was based on this book and that book and this book and that book. And they might mention Nahas, right? So he says at-tamam, the end of the sentence. ويقال. Okay, so then you was right, ذلك الكتاب لا ريب, right, like that. Okay, and then he goes on to next point. So he says, ويقال ذلك ولغة تميم ذاك ولم تعرب ذلك ولا هذا لأنهما لا يثبتان على مسمى. Right? So he says, so you say ذلك and we say ذاك, right? The annoying thing with these words is they change based on who you're talking to. So if I speak to Muhammad Hashir, I say ذلك. When I'm speaking to Muhammad Hashir and Jawad, I say ذلكما. When I'm speaking to all of you, I say ذلكم. When I'm speaking to a female, I say ذلكي. ذلكما, ذلكن, ذلكن الذي لمتنني فيه. Right? So that means when you're speaking Arabic and you're saying the word this and that, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 variables. 4 variables. Is the thing masculine or feminine? 5 variables, actually. Is the thing masculine or feminine? Is the thing human or unhuman? Is the thing singular, dual, or plural? Is the thing far or close? And is it who are you talking to? That's 5, right? So I say هذا or ذاك or ذلك. So Anna, let's assume that for now let's put ذلك and ذاك together. It's not actually that simple, but anyway. هذا and ذلك. So now I've got to think. Let's now make it feminine. هذه and تلك. Then make it dual. هذان and ذانك. هاتان and تانك. Oh, actually, and with the dual as well, I got to think. What's the mahal? Is it ذينك or ذانك or تينك or تانك? So with the dual also it's mu'rab. So that makes a 6th variable, right? But normally it's not like that. So I got to think masculine or feminine. هذا or هذه. Far or close. هذا or ذاك or ذلك. Far or close. Who am I talking to? If it's far away, I got to think who I'm talking to. Is it ذلك or ذلكي or ذلكن or ذلكما or ذلكم? It's going to change. And then also, is it human or non-human? So there's all these things. Look at all of those cars. I say those cars. So I say أولئك السيارات. No. تلك السيارات. I'm speaking to one female and I say انظري يا فاطمة إلى تلك السيارات. Why tilki? It's a group of objects that are far away, and I'm speaking to one female. Right? Does that make sense? And then the 6th variable then is what's this mahal? في هاتين المدرستين. Or is it في تينك المدرستين? Right? هاتان المدرستان أسستا. Right? Does that make sense? أولئك أولئك أولئكن. It's going to change. Normally we just use ذلك and ذلك and أولئك normally. But that's kind of like just speaking general, but we will hear ذلكم, we have ذلكن, these exist. Does that make sense, inshallah?
Yes.
Okay. So he says ذلك, he says وَلُغَةُ تَمِيمٍ ذاك. Why is this important? Because there's a debate there's a debate. When you say هذا, that's close, of course, right? When you say ذلك, that's far. But is there a middle ground? Is there like is there a close, far, and really far? So some have said yes, there is. There's close, far, and really far. There's هذا, ذلك, ذاك, and ذلك. And ذلك is far, is very far, but ذاك is close, right? And actually in English, we used to have that. We would say this car or this house, that house, and yon house. Like we say yonder, right? That means yonder, like over yonder, over there, right? So if you go to the north of England today, they don't use the word that. They use the word yon. So they say, oh, do you want out from yon supermarket? And you're totally lost. Who knows what that means? Where's Zafar? Can you translate for everybody? Do you want out from yon supermarket?
Do you want anything from the supermarket?
Mm-hmm. But out, right? It's like, would you like ought? Right? We use the word ought. That's what they mean. Like, I don't, it didn't help him in ought. It didn't help him at all, right? So do you want anything out? Do you want anything from yon supermarket? That shopping center, or that shopping, what do you call it in America? The store, right? That store far over there. That's what yon originally meant. So in English, we originally had this, that, and yon. And now in the South, we use that, and in the North, they use yon. Zafar, in Manchester, they use yon, or they use that?
That.
Yeah, I think yon is more like Yorkshire, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, here he's saying that it's not an issue of how far, it's just an issue of dialect. Right? So most people say dhalika, and Bani Tamim in the Najd, they say dhaka. Simple as that. Right? So he says, what's the reason why there's no i'rab? He says, وَلَمْ تُعْرَبْ ذَلِكَ وَلَا هَذَا لِأَنَّهُمَا لَا يَثْبُتَانِ عَلَى مُسَمَّى. They aren't used for a particular thing, right? So this can refer to whatever you're referring to, right? Now, that's not the traditional or the late answer. The late answer is, the late answer is the following, is that if you look at these words that are mabni, they all have certain things that are missing, right? So what did we mention about the harf last week? Said the harf has something that doesn't mean anything by itself, right? It needs other words. So you say, does hadha need other words to mean something? The answer is no. But it does need context, right? So if I said, so if I use the word hadha without referring to something, you would have no idea what it is. So just like alladhi needs something, just like a definite what's it called? Just like alladhi needs something, just like a harf needs something in order to explain its meaning. Similarly, an ism ishara needs ishara. You didn't point at anything, there's nothing being referred to, then you wouldn't know what this or that meant. Okay. He says, وَقَالَ بَصْرِيُّونَ. So similarly, we can just say the. So the would mean, I'm not telling you who I'm talking to. I'm just telling you that it's singular and feminine, and that's it. I'm saying it in masculine. And I'm not telling you if it's this or that. It's just the thing being referred to, right? So the would mean the masculine singular thing being referred to, irrespective of whether it's far or close, right? T, same thing, meaning, or the. T or the would mean a singular feminine thing being referred to, irrespective whether it's close or far. Okay. خير. It says وقال بصريين اللام في ذلك توكيد. توكيد of what? It's kind of like excess, something like that, right? So usually when the late scholar is going to say it's for bu'd, right? It's for distance. والله أعلم. توكيد. قال الكسائي والفراء جيء باللام في ذلك لئلا يتوهم أن ذا مضاف إلى الكاف. Right? So it's not the that belongs to you. Right? وقيل جيء باللام بدلا من الهمزة. من الهمزة. هؤلاء, I guess. هؤلاء. Something like that. ولذلك كسرت. Right? هؤلاء has a hamza at the end with a kasra, so ذلك. وقال علي بن سليمان, I don't know who he is, جيء باللام لتدل على شدة التراخي. Right? That's for bu'd. So here this is a qeel at this time. Right? So it's very important that as sciences develop, there will be certain things that have some clout, or so there's some evidence for something, and then suddenly it will become the position. So later scholars, here we're talking about in the 4th century, something like that. Later on, 400 years later, we're going to say, well, alam lil bu'd. Here it just says, قال علي ibn Sulaiman, جيء باللام لتدل على شدة التراخي, right? To say that it's really far, right? Wallahu a'lam. So it's just an opinion, then it becomes the opinion, right? So that's fine if there's sufficient questioning of that opinion. Does that make sense? Somebody suggests something. Maybe there is such thing as an electron. And then you're like, that's ridiculous. I'm trying to say there's some, and then it's like, let's play with that idea. Maybe like, what's going on, right? You play with the idea and say, yeah, I think there is such thing as an electron, right? And you play with, but the problem is when somebody says something and then everyone just rolls with it. That's a problem. Okay, when there's like pure taqleed happening, we say it because so-and-so said it, and then we just go on, and then it becomes fact. That's not good, right? But, just want to mention that picture there. وقال أبو إسحاق, I believe this is الفراء, كسرت فرقا بينها وبين لام الجر, right? And he says ولا موضع للكاف, so the kaf is not a ضمير, it is a حرف خطاب, it's a حرف لا موضع لها من إعراب. والاسم عند البصريين ذا, okay, it is ذا. وعند الفراء الذال نفسها, it's the ذال, right? ثم قال الله عز وجل لا ريب فيه نصب نصب ريب لأن لا عند البصريين مضارعة لإن, not لأن, لإن. Okay, so لا is like inna, right? I tell you الرجل في الدار رجل, right? And I tell you الرجل في الدار, and you don't believe me. So now I go into intense mode and I say لا رجل في الدار or إن في الدار رجلا. Does that make sense? So they're basically like the two opposites of one coin, to emphasize negation or to emphasize affirmation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. So it says عند البصريين مضارعة أي مشابهة لإن فنصبوا بها وأن لا لم تعمل إلا في نكرة لأنها جواب نكرة معنى فيها بمعنى من بنيت على مع النكرة فصير شيئا واحدا. Right, so he says, what is the origin of لا الرجل في الدار is لا من رجل في الدار or ما من رجل في الدار, right? So you can negate emphatically with لا or with min. ما جاء من أحد, not a single person came. That's min زائدة. It doesn't mean from, it just means at all, right? So what happened then is you got the min and you injected it into the indefinite word, and then it became a hybrid between a harf and a noun, and therefore it's mu'rab, mabni. وقال الكسائي سبيل النكرة أن يتقدمها أخبارها فتقول قام رجل فلما تأخر الخبر في التبرئة, تبرئة, right? تبرئة means to acquit yourself of something. لا خير فيه, there's no good in it whatsoever, right? You've acquitted, right? Let's call it a تبرئة. نصبوا ولم ينونوا لأنه نصب ناقص. So they're trying to explain what's going on here. Why would we have this structure? And I believe أخفش, if you look in the معاني القرآن الأخفش or al-Farra, there's more. He's going to quote Farra here, but there's even more discussions like what's happening. Why are we doing this structure, right? Why is it mansub, and then why is it not really mansub though? It's like mansub but not really mansub, right? So he says basically what's happened. قال الكسائي والسبيل النكرة أن يتقدمها أخبارها. The indefinite should always be preceded by its khabars. Why would that be the case? Why would it make sense logically in terms of communication to not start with indefinite word and to have a khabar to come before an indefinite word? Like, which makes more sense if I'm telling you a story and I'm telling you in the Far East, there was a country called Vietnam. Or should I say, a country called Vietnam is in the Far East, which makes more sense as a communication skill. Should I say Zafar is a man? Or should I say a man is Zafar?
Bringing the cover
Zafar
first.
is a man.
Okay, why? Why would you do that? Let's go to Muhammad Hashir's world. Okay, Muhammad Hashir is doing his abstract of his of a piece of research, of the paper that he's submitting. So he is going to introduce the idea with things that are known in his field of scholarship, and then tell you things that are not known. Is that correct? He's going to say, we already know this, and researchers already done this, and our team did this, this, and this, and we came to this. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's how we do things. So when you communicate, you move from the known to the unknown. Okay, you move from the unknown to the unknown, the known from the unknown. You say there's a place in Africa called Kenya. In Kenya, which you know now, there's a city called this. Oh, I didn't know that. This city that you now know houses somebody who does this. What's that? And this that I just referred to is this. That's how we communicate. We communicate by moving things from moving to the known to the unknown. So it does not make sense. That's why we don't have an indefinite word as a mubtada by default, right? You don't say rajulun ja'a, right? Because that doesn't make any sense. A man, which man? Who's that? You can't just say a man. So by default in Arabic, that's actually an invalid sentence. It's not just a weird sentence, it's actually an invalid sentence. As opposed to if I said ja'a rajulun. Ja'a it is a bit vague, but it does refer to a known concept. It's almost like saying hasala al-maji'u. Al-maji' is a concept that I know. Coming is a concept that I know. So now when I follow up with indefinite word, and it was done by a man, I've moved from the known to the unknown, to the unknown, right? Because that's what's happening in Arabic. So when I say la khayra fihi, it's a bit of a weird sentence. So he says, قال الكسائي سبيل نكرة أن يتقدمها أخبارها فتقول قام رجل. Right, so notice قام, he doesn't mean it's the actual khabar. What it means is the information about رجل. Okay? So it's فلما تأخر الخبر في التبرئة نصبوا, they put it in نصب, ولم ينونوا لأنه نصب ناقص, because it's weird. Right? It's a weird sentence. Right? So they treated it in this weird way. Okay? So they're treating it like inna, but it's not. So that's why it's mansub, but it's like weird. So that's why it's mabni. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. He says وقال الفراء سبيل لا أن تأتي بمعنى غير تقول مررت بلا واحد ولا اثنين. I passed by neither one nor two. فلما جئت بها بغير معنى غير وليس نصبت بها ولم تنون لئلا يتوهم أنك أقمت الصفة مقام الموصوف. وقيل إنما نصبت لأن المعنى لا أجد ريبا ولما حذفت الناصبة حذف التنوين. What's فراء saying? 1 second. فراء says لا is supposed to have the meaning neither or not. فلما جئت بغير معنى غير وليس نصبت بها ولم تنون. Not sure what the logic is though. He's just saying it has like a different meaning or something like that. Not sure why that would specifically make you do nasb though. And he says ولم تنون لئلا يتوهم أنك أقمت الصفة مقام الموصوف. Don't understand that. Maybe somebody can think about it. I'm not sure. I don't understand. And وقيل إنما نصبت لأن معنى لا أجد. So there's the implied word I can't find. Right? That's another thing. ويجوز لا ريب فيه تجعل لا بمعنى ليس. Right? ليس ريب فيه. وأنشد سيبويه ومن صد عن نيرانها فأنا ابن قيس لا براح. Right? لا براح. Right? How do I know there's a dhamma there to begin with? How do I know it's not la baraha in poetry?
It matches the meter. I mean the scale.
Okay. So number one, so in poetry, can a word end can it end in a short vowel? Like could this end in a short vowel here or a sukoon or something like that? You can't do that, right? In
Yeah.
poetry, the ajuz, the second line always ends in a long vowel. E, u, a. That's it. Basically always. If it were an alif, it would have you would write it. You say la baraha. You'd write it like that. And that's called alif al-itlaq, right? So alif al-itlaq, so when you pronounce the dhamma as a wow, you leave it as a dhamma. So la barahu, right? If it was a kasra, you'd pronounce it as a ya, okay? But you wouldn't write the ya. With the alif, you'd write it, right? That's number one. So number one, you see the alif there, right? Like you said, la rajula, it means la rajula, right? La khilafa, right? That's number one. Number two, if you also not know the previous line and know that it all ends in u, then this has to end in u as well. Right? Khair. Inshallah, we'll stop there. So if anybody can, somebody can try and figure out what farrat meant here. I don't quite understand. So it may be a different word in a different way. So his work Ma'an al-Quran by Farrat is available, and it's interesting. In the beginning of it, this young man, he's called Simirri or something like that. He says, he was like I think he's like 19 or 20. He says, Farrat dictated this book on Mondays and Wednesdays mornings in this masjid from the year this to yes. It's pretty cool. Like you see the actual specifics, like Farrat. Like here's the book we have from Farrat. How did it reach us from? I think it's called Simirri or something like that. Simirri, young man, like 20 years old. He was there. Farrat dictated it from his mind with no notes whatsoever. Right? No notes whatsoever, just explaining all of these things from his own head. Subhanallah. So have a look, see if it's phrased in another way. Maybe the editor of that copy will footnote explain it. Maybe Samin al-Halabi might explain it. Wallahu alam. I don't quite understand what he's talking about. خير. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My apologies for tangents about siphoning. And what else did we talk about today? Who knows? Assalamu alaikum.